Okay? So if you look at the agenda, you'll realize it really just reiterates what I just said. We can go down many paths, because this is a full day's worth of an agenda, not a 45-minute. So I'm happy to dive deeper in any one of these topics, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go in a bit of an overview of Forrester's view of what is zero trust, okay? We're going to dive into what Symantec thinks is zero trust, and then I'm going to do a little bit of futuristic thinking and tell you what I think is going to happen as a result of zero trust, because it's pushing the envelope a bit in terms of connectivity and security. So let's start with, I'm just going to build this slide right out, right? So zero trust is not a new topic. How many of you already knew that? Like, zero trust is over a decade old, okay? Zero trust started out originally as network access control. I need to lock down the devices connecting to my network, and I need to do this thing in my network called microsegmentation to ensure the threat or the data is kind of has a perimeter around it. If something happens in that tiny little perimeter, it doesn't go anywhere else. Or if data is being exfiltrated out of this tiny little perimeter, I know when and where it happened. And that went out the door. Why? Because the age-old 2005 of sitting in front of my computer, logging on, using VPN to connect to my data center and accessing my email or my internal servers or my applications went out the door in 2007 when Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone, and then the application world skyrocketed, and now Office 365 is in the cloud. How many of you use Office 365? Workday, right? Semantic, you're not allowed to respond. Any cloud SaaS applications to help either manage data, content, people, etc. Right? That's just where we are. And why is that dangerous? For one main reason: your identity doesn't matter anymore. Right? You guys agree with that? Does your identity matter? Why doesn't it matter? Well, because I can pick up a device, get to that SaaS application, and use a username and password. Right? How many of you have secure username and passwords across your organization? That is, please do not answer. Because the answer is none of them, right? And the reason for that is your security is as good as your weakest link. And who's your weakest link? Everyone's connecting to your network, right? It's the people. And why are they weak in terms of identity? How many of you have let's just personalize this. I won't pick on anyone. I have dozens. I definitely don't have count of how many applications I connect to with my username and password, right? You guys can all relate. What happens after that first time you create a super cool and secure password, and then 3 months later you forgot what it is? What do you do? Reset. What do you reset to? Password that you know. Right? And we're all in security. I'm not worried about you guys, right? I'm worried about the tens of thousands of people that you guys have to look after accessing your applications or your data or your network. My mom works at a hospital and accesses incredibly sensitive data. She has one password. Everywhere. Mind-blowing, right? And she'll give you that password. Like, oh, I need to fix your computer, Mom. Here's my password. Like, done. Writes it down, and I have no idea what she does at work, but that's what you guys are doing. That's what everyone's doing. They're using known username passwords. And why is that dangerous?
I just need to get it right once.
It's dangerous because they have been breached. Let's think about the largest mega breaches in the past 12 to 24 months. Equifax, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. Just for the last 24 months, right? Marriott. It's like, it's never ending. And guaranteed, either for sure your, and everyone on your networks, their username password is, and why is that dangerous? Because as a hacker, the first thing I'm going to do when I get the 1 million users username password for $1 on the dark web, what am I going to do? I have a cool little script that is going to take in all those passwords and is going to figure out who those people are, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to collect where they work, and how am I going to figure that out? And how do I figure out associated email addresses to work email addresses? LinkedIn. God, I love it. I'm going to pull in where you work, and then I'm going to take every username you've ever used online, which is a metasploit. It's an easy one to figure out. And I'm going to run a script against every application out there to figure out if your username password is going to work. Right? So that's the danger of the cloud. But there's good news. There's actually more control in the cloud than there is on premises. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Okay? So it's not hopeless. Please adopt cloud. So I'll make myself laugh a lot. I'm sorry. Look, we need to strengthen data, 100%. You need, first and foremost, look, zero trust goes out the door if you have no idea what you're trying to protect. If you don't have a data protection program where you've gone through the effort of identifying what it is you need to protect, you shouldn't be in security. Period. I feel very strongly about that. Can't do that. The access privilege and limiting access, I think that's part of our day one homework. Who has access to what? That's where Active Directory comes in. That's where a slew of other technologies come in to help you figure out who fits where in the tree or in the forest of access rights, right? That's baseline. What's not baseline is to improve your security detection and response, right? That's where the world gets complex, because the next slide I'm going to go into is going to add to that complexity a little bit, because what Zero Trust came out and did and said, hey, I need to put data in the center of my world, and I need to build my entire security architecture and framework on who and how do I access that data, and then how do I orchestrate that, okay? That is by far the biggest challenge you will have, and you do have, without asking you to raise your hands, on managing your security architecture, is just kind of getting a grasp of what is happening and how do I know that what just happened actually impacts my data, or have I been breached, right? It's correlating all that mess, and what does that mean? Just to kind of throw that out there and make sure we're on the same page. Who has a SOC? Who doesn't have a SOC? Okay. How do you orchestrate every incident and net flow traffic and things happening on your network in a way where you can make sense of it? Exactly. Without orchestration, you are like, I have no idea what I'm doing today. You come in and you're chasing the most recent, hottest incident that you need to chase today. It's not a strategic approach, right? And it gets very cumbersome, very fast, and overwhelming. And then you go, you know this, but you ask for more money, and what's going to happen? Resources are kind of limited these days, right? Okay, so all in, sold on this zero trust thing, right? Where do I start? So there are a lot of places you can start, and you know, how many of you applied other security architecture, like NIST? How many look at NIST to figure out where do we get started, right? There are dozens of them. There really are. I mean, obviously, we should all pay attention to NIST. That's probably the most baked version. But they all really start with, why do I care about zero trust? And this is where I feel zero trust changes the game a little bit. Because the first thing you need to look at is, why am I thinking about implementing zero trust? Right? What is your zero trust strategy? And if you don't know what that is, please rewind a little bit and do some homework on zero trust to understand, where do I begin from zero trust strategy. And then I'm going to blow past that, because you can take a very wide view of where I should start, or a very specific view. I'm adopting Office 365. I'm worried about my users and my data when it comes to cloud connectivity. That's a very narrow view of where do I want to begin, and you can begin to apply very specific measures against that. What am I worried about with my data? Well, I want to know, do I have sensitive data? Perfect. Then I can start looking at technologies that help me detect sensitive data. I want to know, are my users being malicious when they're accessing my network? Well, how do I figure that out? Well, there are technologies that tell you what users' behavior is while they're on your applications. I want to lock down who has access to my cloud applications. Well, there's a slew of products there as well, right? So you have to think first, what is my strategy? Where do I want to begin? And then you can start applying technology to it, right? Sorry, I'm blowing past a few of these points all in one. And then after you figure out what technologies you need, then you highlight specific, you basically at that point have a plan. You have a plan of what you need to do. You have very specific technologies that you know you need to deploy. And then now you can go back and look at resources and timelines and implementation, right? Or you can back up and say, you know what? Everything's already in play, but we haven't applied any real security measures across it. Or we need to look at it from a perspective of, we need to, best case scenario, zero trust, here's what it should look like. Where are we today, right? So there are multiple ways you can approach it. None of them are back of the napkin type of an approach. Like, you really need to do some digging, starting with your users and data. So what we did from that perspective is, hey, zero trust, let's just take the obfuscation that comes with zero trust and that confusion of all these things that hover around this circle called data, and let's break it down, right? One thing we did is we said, look, I'm going to take the 7 pillars of zero trust or tenets, and I'm going to make them 6. And the reason I want to make them 6 is because I think automation and orchestration are the same thing, right? You're trying to accomplish the same thing. They shouldn't be separate. But data is where you should start, right? And then I think everything around that can be, in my opinion, combined in one, right? And because if you figure out what it is that you want to protect, what is the sensitive data you want to protect, you can figure out a lot of things working up to it based on how. Because network may not be a thing that you care about because what your project is specific to cloud, right? You might just want to worry about data, devices, and people, and analytics, right? So these are all very interrelated. And this is where the conversation starts to come up of, how do I begin to implement zero trust? Because if I'm going to look at this from a product perspective, right, we mentioned earlier, and these are not Symantec products, these are things that you should consider from a product perspective in each category, okay? These are things that if I started grilling you on how do you secure your devices, you're going to name off 4 or 5 things that I can guarantee you are up here. If they're not, let me know, I'll add them. But when you start thinking about how do I implement a true zero trust framework, it all of a sudden looks like what I already do from a security infrastructure perspective. How many of you have encryption on devices? How many of you have firewalls? Right? We start going through that list. If I can go through all of these, how many of you use multi-factor authentication? I'm scared to ask this because some people might say no, and then I'll have a heart attack. Okay. Automation analytics, that goes everywhere. Automation analytics is really everywhere. And why do I say that? Because the Splunks of the world fit in, EDRs, UEBA, right? There's a ridiculous amount of technology that go there. Again, which one is good for you? That depends on step 1, what's your goal? But if you go down all of these, now, why did I throw this up here? Because I'm baiting you a little bit. Because what happens when I look at zero trust from a deployment perspective we're talking about everything you currently do to some extent from a security architecture perspective, right? Make sure I'm not talking too much. But it all needs to come together a little bit, and this is where the platform conversation starts coming up. And I'm not going to dive into a whole spiel on platform, okay? But I do want to let you know, look, your platform is a very simple thing to think about. And this slide right here is, you only need to take away one point. And that one point is that you have many things that need to connect to your data, whether it's from your headquarters, your remote users, your branch offices, however you can correlate that to your network architecture. I'm sure it's not too far off of this. But there are certain threat vectors you need to protect. And that previous slide was all those technologies that you use for those threat vectors. We all protect our endpoints. If there's a resounding no, please make it known. We all protect our network with one form of tech or another. We all protect our email, I hope, in one form or another. And we all either do or want to protect all our cloud apps. And how do we protect them? Well, we put threat protection, data protection, we have some sort of compliance enforcement, right? Analytics. We look at our encrypted traffic or some sort of firewall/proxy, and we try to bring all them together in some sort of a SOC, right? And that is complex as hell. I can't overemphasize how complex it is to bring together what Cisco's NetFlow outputs and HP's NetFlow outputs and every vendor out there that thinks they're correlating packets and giving it to me in a way where I think I can understand it, that's feeding into my SOC. And who's doing that work? How many engineers do you have that are just working just on Splunk so they can make sense of what's happening from a network perspective, right? So the onus right now is on the users. And this is where the platform approach is getting heavy because the onus should be on us, the vendors, not the users, not our customers. The onus is on us to say, hey, we at Symantec should be working with McAfee, should be working with Cisco, should be working with Microsoft, should be working with every competitor out there that is trying to solve for the exact same thing in some form or another, right? You know, your Cisco's will fall into some network, they're dabbling into some cloud apps, they have absolutely nothing, well, they do really good at email actually, nothing to do with endpoint. And then I also have HP, which dabbles a little bit in some of them, Microsoft dabbles a little bit in some areas, but I've found some features, products that I like out of all these vendors and I use them. And now I have to figure out how all these APIs have to work with my platform, which is my SOC, figure out what's happening across all of them. So what the platform story is that us as the vendors have done that API integration for you. We've worked with Cisco, with McAfee, with Microsoft, with all those point vendors. We've done the API integration focused specifically on what should outputs be. Well, output should be about data protection, information protection, user behavior, right? Threat protection, correlation of different incidents so we can find out, is there any threat? And then we feed it into your Splunk with very specific outputs, or your SOC. I just keep using Splunk as an example, right? And then you can apply that to Wild Wild Web, which is, you know, just the open network, or to specific applications that you guys said you have, like Office 365 or AWS or Azure, whatever it may be, right? And just a quick plug for Symantec here. Here are some of the vendors that we've worked with on this platform, right? And we've done very heavy API integrations with all these vendors to give you that output, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on here. This is all public. And I'm not going to spend too much time on the platform versus fragmented unless you guys want me to. Right? The real value here is total cost of ownership. Like the bottom line is you shouldn't have to be figuring or hiring extra people to integrate our products together so you can have specific outcomes. That's just summarizing it. Okay? If you want to know more about this, please catch me afterwards. We'll have a cup of coffee or a beer and we can talk. Cool? Now to the third topic, which I think I'm going to have a little more fun with this one. So now I get to stop talking about products and talk about where I think the future of cloud networking is going. Right? So this is where you guys can start calling BS on me if you want. This is totally futuristic stuff. And the reason for it is, how do you currently find out what's happening on the internet? Companies like Zscaler are in business, Symantec is in the proxy business, Palo Alto is in that business. What are they all doing? What are we all doing? I'm not going to say it's them versus us. What are we all doing? Well, we have proxies, and what proxies do is they're very intelligent these days, and they can tell me what is happening on my traffic from my endpoints going to the network. And I can add things to that. I can add content analysis, malware analysis, data protection analysis, and I can find out what's happening on my web. That's great. That's awesome. I want proxy to protect my Office 365 traffic. Oh, wait a minute. You need CASB for that. It's another proxy. CASB is Cloud Access Security Broker, which means it's another proxy. And the difference here is what this technology does is it has an API integration into the biggest business applications that you guys will use out there, right? Dozens of them. And why is that cool? Well, now I can do user behavior analysis, data protection, threat protection on that application, because Box isn't doing that for me, right? And I already have data protection policies that I just want to apply them to the cloud. Well, then your solution is CASB. So now I already have two different needs. Now I'm on proxy number 2. Well, guess what? How many of you have internal applications that you currently use VPN for? Everyone, right? And then the new solution for that is software-defined perimeter. Because I can actually try to build VPN into AWS until AWS upgrades something in the back end, and then my VPN breaks and I have to refigure out how to do the port forwarding and all the good stuff that VPNs come with and get VPN to work again so I can connect to AWS. Well, what about all my internal applications, like an internal wiki that my engineers connect back to HQ for with VPN so they can access? Well, there's a solution for that. It's called software-defined perimeter. And it's a super powerful solution. It's the hottest thing. I mean, it's so hot when it comes to zero trust. Every software-defined perimeter company out there, even the one that Semantic just acquired, the #1 title next to their name is the future of zero trust, right? Talk about even more confusion. And why is that? Well, because there's a reverse proxy here, a very intelligent reverse proxy. I'll take in my internal wiki, I'll put it in my DMZ, I'll plug a little piece of code called reverse proxy, and when I go to www.semantic.internalwiki.com, I just get redirected to the proxy. I log in, cloud-based, no VPN, and I'm on. I never fired up a VPN. I'm using a BYO device. Super powerful. I'm using my iPad to connect securely to my data center without having a VPN client. Super powerful technology. But guess what? That's another proxy now I have to use. So now I'm running 3 different proxies. And how fun is that? Right? So our opinion is that zero trust is going to say, let's redefine this world, because the goal here is to secure the cloud. And why do I need 3 different technologies, VPN, software-defined perimeter, CASB, firewall/proxy, to get data? Why can't there be an architecture that just combines them all, right? And I'm going to run through the next few slides, because I already talked about this. The perimeter is gone. There's no more moat. It's a bit provocative. The firewall is dead. I hope that raises some eyebrows. Should I talk competitive differentiation? Like how many different vendors, how they're approaching it? Do you guys care? Like the Microsoft world, as an example, and somewhat a lot of other vendors, but just so you can get an idea, is I'm going to lock down the device, right, with some sort of a network access control. Microsoft does a really good job of doing that. Why? Because they own the operating system, right? And now they have a similar function for Mac. And they can lock down some of the apps, specifically Microsoft apps. And they're telling you, hey, we're locking down that device and we're locking down the apps. Well, what's happening in the middle? We don't know and we don't care, but we're locking both ends down, right? And then you have the other approach where, you know, what we're saying there is we're going to make it super seamless because we're going to create a VPN tunnel between the device and the user. But we're just going to manage the application side of it. Well, that's fine, but that secure tunnel is great, but I need to know what's happening in this secure tunnel. Well, we're Google. We're not going to let you know what's happening in that tunnel. That's kind of our bread and butter, right? We sell everything in that tunnel. But I need to know, is there a man in the middle? Is there any theft happening between point A and point B? What's happening on the applications? Well, we really don't care, but we'll securely connect you to those applications, right? And then comes the, hopefully this isn't too confusing of a slide because I should have made it a build slide, but I didn't. And then comes the Semantic approach where it incorporates all of them, right? And this is, like I said, this is a bit futuristic, so don't take any pictures. But if we think about just working backwards here, I care about protecting all of these areas. And everything from my headquarters, workloads, SaaS, including your email, by the way, I didn't separate email, right? And the web. But I want the same policy to run across all of them. What policy is that? I need to know if there's any threats, any data theft, and who the users are and what they're doing when they're on my cloud infrastructure, period. I don't want to go correlate what's happening on my proxy with what's happening on my VPN, with what's happening in my cloud applications to understand that. I want that same policy to be applied to all of them. Well, if I want to do that and I work backwards, that means everything has to run through that. All my kind of this little boxes here that has my anti-malware, sandboxing, isolation, multi-factor authentication, data protection, and I want all my applications, all my connectivity to go through that way. That's not difficult. If you think about it, why is that difficult? That's not difficult. The technologies exist. These three proxies just need to work together a little bit. So if the user is coming in from a traditional NAC VPN perspective, they should hit my web security gateway, whether that's CASB or proxy. And by the way, why are they different? Why is CASB and proxy different? They shouldn't be different. And I know that's dinging us as well at Symantec because they are different. Actually, I'll sell you every one of those products separately, your VPN, your proxy, your CASB, right? But why are they not working together? Right? They should work together, and it's pretty easy for us to get them to work together because the endpoint, regardless of what it is, trying to touch any of those applications, and I can add either reverse proxy or built-in CASB type functionality. Are you guys familiar with CASB? Because I keep throwing that term out there. I can spend 30 seconds on it to clarify if you want. What that really is that when I connect to, and you guys have probably all done this at some point, when I connect to a cloud application such as Office 365, it's going to ask you for your company email address, or based on the email address you put in to log in, it's going to redirect you to your company portal. And then you're going to put in your username, password again, or your single sign-on, however you have that set up, and it might do a multi-factor push, and it gets you. That process of what just happened there is incorporated in CASB, right? And then Microsoft, what they'll do is they have it built in. You know, Symantec will redirect you to our cloud proxy, and then we'll apply a lot of this technology onto it. But if I'm doing a VPN, it won't happen. But why is that? I mean, it's a proxy, for crying out loud. It's a single point of connectivity. It should be one product, and based on where you're going, I can apply the right policy to it. I mean, it sounds like so basic and revolutionary, yet no one is doing it, right? So this is where we're going, right? And right now, of course, this is future, so I can't prove anything until it's working. I'm going to confuse the hell out of you with that slide, so I'm not going to use it. So you'll see that coming out of us. But we have thrown the gauntlet down. We did it at RSA. We said, look, even though we're not there, this is the way it should be. Right? And thanks to Zero Trust really challenging the industry on you need to apply XYZ technologies to that tunnel from user to data and apply data protection, threat protection, network protection, all the way across, got us thinking. And the more we dug into, hey, what is Symantec's Zero Trust story, the more we realized, oh boy, it's very fragmented. It's ridiculously fragmented, right? And here's how funny it was. Just something simple. Kind of a funny story. When we were working with Forrester, and Forrester, Chase Cunningham specifically came to us and said, hey, this is what Cisco's saying they're doing. What are you guys doing from that perspective? And we're like, oh yeah, let me bring my network guys in. Here's what we're doing from a network perspective. And they're like, hey, this is the software-defined perimeter company. Here's what they're doing. What are you guys doing from that perspective? And we brought in our software-defined people. And they're like, what are you doing from data? And we brought in our data protection people. And what are you doing from network access control or identity access control? And we brought in our identity people. And we're like, we have 10 different freaking stories, and none of them are converged. Right? Some of them are converged. So if you're a Semantic customer, you know we've done a ridiculous amount of integrations. But this story hadn't existed, and then we said, well, wow, this is simple. We're going to collapse, because we can, because we have all three of them, every type of network access proxy together. Right? And we're going to throw down the gauntlet and say, and this is where we challenge other vendors in the industry, I won't bring up any more names, but we're going to clean the pipe, regardless of where it's coming from and where it's going. I don't even care if I don't have a single agent on the device that you're using to connect to the applications. Right? And how are we doing that? Well, there's a few ways. Reverse proxy I talked about, but I'm going to talk about one new technology that really tries to solve for, and this is funny that I'm using BYOD, and I think I may have used a similar slide in 2010. But because the problem really hasn't been fixed, right? So it's funny how it's been fixed. I talked to either government or healthcare or financial organizations, which tend to be ridiculously heavy on access. What are you doing about BYOD? We're like, well, you mean letting our employee buy their own device and then we put on our agent? No, that's not BYOD. Right? Your employee bringing in their own, or picking which device they want, and you putting an agent on it is not BYOD. You putting MDM on their mobile device so it can connect to your network is not BYOD. Right? That's called managed device. Right? That's corporate-owned managed device at that point. If you have the ability to wipe that device and control what it has access to, it's not BYOD. Right? The real world of BYOD, I'm going to go to Verizon or Walmart, and I'm going to buy a device, and I'm going to get on the web, and I'm going to access my Office 365, and I don't have anything controlling that device. But I'm going to do it as securely as anything you may put on that device. Well, how do I do that? Well, I don't care what's on that device. I'm going to tell you what that user is doing when they connect to your application, and everything happening in that pipe between that device and that application. How am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that through what's happening in the middle there. I'm looking at data protection policies, user behavior policies, malware analysis, threat analysis. I'm going to sandbox everything. And I'm adding one new technology that some of you have probably heard about. Okay. The setup is bad. But that you probably have heard of, called isolation, right? And this thing is called, you've never heard of this for sure, it's called mirror proxy. And what it is, let's look at the current applications. We all understand what forward proxy is. Forward proxy, I know where I'm going. That's like the CASBs of the world, the network proxies of the world. I know where I'm going, and I'm just going to forward you through my tunnel, do whatever I need to do from an analysis perspective and let you be on your way. That's what forward proxy. Reverse proxy is the new software-defined perimeter world, meaning I don't have control over that application. I just put that application on DMZ or it's AWS, but when I hit that service, it's going to route me back to somewhere in the cloud, some sort of a cloud proxy, throw me back into the proxy. So it's reversing me back into the proxy, and I'm going to clean that way, right? Well, what about I don't want to do that? Because there's some serious complications there. How many of you use software-defined perimeter, where you have to write a reverse proxy? Every time your AWS or your box or whoever it is changes any firmware software, you have to probably, depending on what they actually did, rewrite your reverse proxy code. Right? If you don't know that, the people that work for you that do that do know that, painfully know. Right? It's not an easy method. But it works. And we sell it, and please continue buying it, but it's not an easy method. I told you, I make myself laugh, probably inappropriate. So what is this reverse proxy? We'll jump right into an architectural conversation here. So it takes advantage of this new technology called isolation. Who understands isolation? So we acquired this very powerful isolation company about a year ago now. And what they do is they take every web-based application, and I know some of you guys are immediately going to say sandbox, and they're going to render it in the cloud. And the user is going to think they're accessing that application, but it's actually an isolation application. Because what's happening is everything gets rendered in the cloud. Executables, you're you can actually stream YouTube live in isolation, so it's not sandboxing, right? It's rendering in the cloud, and the user just sees the visual. Here's why that's powerful. When I open up I know if this is basic, I don't mean to offend anyone. When I open up a website, what does that communication look like? Am I accessing the website, or is the website accessing my device? Who said that? Thank you. Both. When you access a website, you just gave that website full access to you. It's a little scary. And trust me, I have a lot of attacks based just on that concept, right? I mean, that is the foundation of how most of your devices, outside of email, get infected. Okay? So we said, why? Why are we letting that happen? Let's render it on our servers where we can do malware analysis. We can do the whole kit and caboodle of what we know as a threat protection industry on that website, and all you do is look at it. You can interact with it because we're handling that interaction between you and us and the website. Make sense? Sinking in a bit? So we said, hey, we have that. Why don't we apply that to Zero Trust? Because that way, if I'm rendering every application in the cloud, I don't care what device you're connecting with. I just need to know if I want you to connect to that application. Do you have the rights to connect to that application? And I can figure that out through multiple ways. Of course, your basic username, password, but multi-factor authentication, and then I can run the whole gamut of data protection, threat protection, everything that you need running in the cloud. Now, it may not be a perfect solution for every scenario, but this will solve 90% of your network access problems. Right? Okay. I told you I was going to go over a lot of stuff today. I probably just denial of service to your brains, which is okay. It's good for the brain sometimes to get denial of service. That's the last product slide I was going to go over. So I'm done, actually, in 2 minutes. So we went over what is Zero Trust. I'm going to tell you how you can learn more. I've done some webinars. Forrester's done webinars, right? Multiple companies done webinars. Please access some of that content, right? We talked a little bit about what you can apply from a technology perspective, which pretty much means every vendor in cybersecurity can help you. You just have to figure out what you're trying to get done. From that perspective, the main thing you should really dive into a little deeper is platforms. You should really look at platforms a lot deeper, right? And then take it on from there. So I have some suggested reading. This presentation is available for you. Please download it, use it. My information is not on there, but you can catch me on LinkedIn, and if from there you'll figure out where I work, and from there you'll figure out what my work email address is, right? It's kind of, all right. And we've done some, in my opinion, I mean, you can go to the Semantic website. We have a lot of really good content there. The faster I can produce content and push it up there, the faster it gets up there. I mean, it's constantly changing. We're adding more to it, so please jump on. As an example, Luminate is that isolation, or sorry, software-defined perimeter company. See, I'm getting all the acquisitions confused now. You can always download the Zero Trust report from Forrester, or just contact us directly if you don't want to pay for it, and we might work something out. And if you have any questions, my name is Salah Nassar, salah.nassar@symantec.com. Again, it's on the presentation at the very beginning, and happy to dive in any topic I went over today or answer questions. I think I kind of ran out of Q&A time, but no one's taking me out. Any questions? Info overload? Security by obfuscation? Confuse the hell out of you guys? Cool. Look, I know this was a lot. It probably didn't give you a footprint of where do I get started tomorrow if I have but I did give you a roadmap of where you can look and some content you can chase after. But if you really want to sit down or have a one-on-one on any of these, more than happy to. Okay. Thank you, guys.